Hello and welcome to the 2022 Child Welfare Virtual Expo on partnership with youth and families. The theme of this session will be a productive partnership and really being committed to lived expertise. As we open our session, we would like to welcome one of our parent partners, Colleen, who you will learn a little bit more about later on to share a personal story of hers.
So after reunification, I found myself at the same hospital that was part of what brought my children into care. And I was super nervous to go back there. It's never a comfortable time to go back where your children were removed from you. But I had to, and I was trying to keep myself together, help my anxiety. And when I got there, immediately I'm at the front desk and I overhear this father talking to the security officer and was trying to explain, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. My case manager said I had to come and talk to someone. I'm supposed to talk to someone. I'm supposed to talk to, I think, the doctors. I don't know. And then I went to registration and someone from the front desk came over to registration and talk about this father. And they started laughing. And she was like, please don't bring him to me. And I was just like, what? Like, how are we treating families like this? And then I found myself in radiology and I was just sitting there with my daughter. And the father came into radiology and was trying to explain to the receptionist what was happening. He's like, I'm just having to talk to someone, a doctor, the radiologist who took my son's x-rays, and I got to talk to them. And the receptionist was pretty nice to him. And she's like, well, let me go see if I can find someone. Brought in someone from the back, and the person was asking him questions, and he said something about a skeletal survey that was done on his child. And immediately the tone shifted from this hospital worker and how they were interacting with him. It became judgmental. It became that this father was, obviously there because someone assumed he abused his child. And he was trying to explain that as part of his case plan, he was supposed to talk to the doctors and give his side of the story of what happened. And I immediately just felt like something's not right. He needs to have an advocate. He's confused. He doesn't know what's happening. He doesn't know his rights. He doesn't know what impact any of this can have on him in his case. And so when the person walked back to the back, I looked at my daughter and I said, I am sorry if I embarrass you, but I got to go talk to this dad. I cannot just let him just sit there. And so I walked over and introduced myself and explained that I'm a parent with lived experience, that I walked a very similar situation that he had, and that I was here to support him any way that I possibly could. I walked over to the receptionist, asked for a blank paper to write all my contact information down on. And even the receptionist was very thankful I was there to help support the father. I'm sure she sees this more times than she probably would like to. And I just sat with the father and just realized how amazing and kind he was, and how he just wanted to do the right thing, but he didn't know how or what to do. And he was confused. It was over an hour of him trying to figure out what he was supposed to be doing with zero guidance. And we just talked and I provided my information. And I just realized the importance that having those peer supports next to us as we walk our journey is so important. And the power and strength that we can give our parents, even in just the community, it's priceless.
So as we have heard from our opening story, Colleen shared a vulnerable moment of connecting to a parent who may have been lost in the system out of sheer lack of experience in navigation, and that this could land this parent into a world of unknowns without guidance. Without a network for youth and families to really connect to one another, these vulnerable circumstances can happen often. Today, we will hear from some incredible experts in the field that have found their initial way to this professional realm by something you cannot teach in a book, an expertise that can only come from being the person navigating the many facets of the child welfare system by walking through it, living through it, and then coming full circle to bring a perspective that can restore power balance while developing professional, productive partnerships between systems and those it aims to serve. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Pascal to introduce herself and share some of her personal experience.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everyone in virtual land. My name is Pascal Wynn, and I'm a dedicated consultant on a federal, state, and local level. I'm also a person with lived experience and have a wealth of information on the importance of collaborating with folks that have this type of experience. Here are just a few examples of my own. For one, it started for me when I was offered a membership with the Alliance Children's Trust Fund. Their network, called the Birth Parent National Network, also known as the BPNN. From there, I was given tools and training and the connection that I wouldn't otherwise have had if it weren't for those great folks who believed in me. After some time with the network, I was then trained in the 5 protective factors, and that led me to want to do more. Not long after that, I started doing consulting with Casey Family Programs and professors at Wisconsin-Madison on very important research dedicated to reduction in CPS involvement and removals that we can all probably agree are linked to poverty, especially those with lived experience. I've also worked in my own state with DCFS and the local FRC as a parent mentor and seen firsthand how folks with lived experience, are not taken serious and are not offered a livable wage. That led me to continue seeking out ways I could support my own family and continue the great work. That was when I became a consultant for the center, which I am so pleased to be able to collaborate with. The opportunities for growth are endless, and it's due to the huge support and opportunities to learn, not only that, to be part of the change that we are all seeking.
Thank you so much, Pascal. It has been a great experience working alongside a professional and birth parent on this presentation. I would like to take a moment to introduce myself as well. My name is Jennifer Rhodes, and I'm a professional social worker, and I have lived expertise as both a child and youth who aged out of the foster care system. I've been able to work at the state, federal, and local level beginning at the age of 17, working with current youth to advocate for themselves in the court setting. Additionally, I now serve as a consultant for the center across a variety of projects, from placement stability, promoting safe and stable families, and serving as a coach to other professionals with lived expertise. Outside of consulting, I support current youth aging out of foster care to achieve their post-secondary educational goals and achieve their personal goals. So as we move into our presentation to hear from our keynote speakers, some key elements to keep in mind are: 1, as we will reference in our resources, engagement is the matrix. It looks different at every level and it plays out in very unique ways. Your key to insight and improvement of partnership in your area is by connecting with those in your area and those who have been trailblazers to ensure the power dynamics moving from client to professional in a system are brought balanced with sensitivity. 2, compensation is an imperative part of partnership. This ensures that youth and families are able to show up fully in the work, and it is important to remain consciously aware that those of us who have experienced the system and come back to work in the advancement of practice are consenting to the emotional tax of this work. Some of us come from a place of positive experience, and some of us come from a place of transmuting those negatives we experienced into growth. Both are valid, and both of those versions lead to growth. 3, representation and visibility for all backgrounds that experience the system is the key to creating a change and leading to sustainable improvements. Be curious, think innovatively, and mostly honor the vulnerability that it takes to step into a system that has the power over the most intimate parts of the lives of youth and families. As we are here today, we ask you to listen with an open mind and an open heart to the experiences that have brought each of these incredible professionals we have the honor to hear from today. We hope that it will bring change for engagement, partnership, and spark ideas for truly approaching the road to equality of those experiencing these spaces still today. For our first speaker, we will be discussing navigating professional engagement within an organization that was previously personally involved. So next I want to invite Ashley O'Brien. Thank you so much for being here, Ashley, and I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce yourself.
Of course, thanks for having me. My name is Ashley. I am a family consultant with the Capacity Building Center for States. I worked as a parent partner with a nonprofit organization for several years, and now in my day-to-day, I'm actually a marketing manager. I actually aged out of the foster care system as a young adult with a child, and then later had another child, and in my mid-20s was actually pulled back into the foster care system for my own child's sake. And so I've navigated it from every angle and look forward to sharing some of that with you all.
Thank you so much for sharing the different experiences that you've had engaging with the system. I know that that can be challenging, but also insightful. So thanks for bringing your perspective here with us today. So I know that you've worked in a lot of different settings and now you're doing consulting work. So can you tell me a little bit about how you think people with lived expertise should be compensated?
Sure. I think that a lot of compensation in many areas of the workforce depend upon things like degree levels and skill levels and experience. However, I think that's harder to gauge when we're working with folks with lived experience. So in that case, it's important to look at what you value from them, how much you're valuing their expertise. Think of it as consulting with an expert, for your data analyzing. You're going to pay them what they're worth based off of what they're able to offer you and how they're going to help your organization. Consider those same factors when you're paying people with lived expertise. They do not deserve to be paid less because they don't have a bachelor's degree. They have years and years of expertise dealing with the very thing that you're hoping to make change in. So take that for what it's worth and pay them what it's worth.
Yeah, well, and speaking to that point of how do you put a dollar amount or a pay amount on the experience that you gain from growing up in the system, aging out of the system, and then coming back in the emotional part of working in the system, and compare that to a degree where you're in a classroom receiving education. So next, I wanted to talk a little bit about what is it like and what are some basic considerations of navigating the workplace as someone with lived expertise?
Sure. I know that in my experience, it was the way that I came to work for the program that I was receiving services from was quite odd, because then it put me into a position where what had formerly been my counselor was now my boss, my supervisor. And so it kind of develops this weird dual relationship where I'm not sure how to navigate it and they're not sure how to navigate it. And it creates a lot of muddiness in the workplace. And not to mention then feeling kind of de-identified, where something that had previously been confidential is now privy among my colleagues and my peers in the workplace. Similarly, it creates a sticky situation for the supervisors who have all this information about their employee and have to figure out what is relevant to the workplace. How can they bring this up without, again, juggling that weird dual relationship that's occurring? And not to mention the trauma that we've experienced and the safety that we feel with this person who may now be our supervisor. The trauma itself leads many of us to become really eager to please, and therefore makes it harder for us to say no to things that may otherwise be uncomfortable, which leads into other aspects of juggling this transition into the workplace.
Yeah, and really speaking to the vulnerability that it takes to navigate a workplace, be willing to be in that environment where you've had this intimate, in a way, relationship, and then now it's like, how do you separate personal and professional? And that can be really challenging. So thank you for sharing on that as well. And then when you think about going into an organization, sometimes it can be almost tokenizing for young adults and parents. And so how do you think that organizations can do better with that?
I think that, for one, really recognizing the power that they hold over the person with lived experience. And so especially in my situation, when I was previously receiving services from them and they know so much about me, and I want to make them happy because I kind of feel like I owe them something, right, for their services. Really reiterating over and over and over that they can say no, that it is okay, that if they're not comfortable, this does not have to be a condition of their employment every single time, and recognizing the other skills that they have. I'd say another way to ensure that folks with lived experience are not just being tokenized is making sure to really listen to what they're saying, build into your infrastructure, build into your infrastructure methods to be sure that you are incorporating their feedback. So if you're looking to bring them to the table and get their feedback on policies or practices that you're currently using, don't just take that feedback, check the box that you talk to somebody with lived expertise, and move on with what you're going to do anyways. There should be a system in place where you can come back in a certain amount of time, let's say 90 days, and see, oh, this is what the people with lived experience advised. Have we put this into effect? If not, how can we do that now, right away? And if we have, how is it going? How's that turning out? Really just evaluating your organization based off of the feedback of the folks that you're valuing their expertise, not just checking off that box.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the common use term of are we creating an authentic environment? What does that really look like? And when you've been someone that's received services and then working in that organization, how do they know that what you're saying, what you're showing up as speaks to your lived expertise, or are you over identifying with an organization and navigating just some of the impacts that trauma has on how relationships are built, what that person may want from you in that. So I really appreciate you speaking to that, because there are long-term impacts that the trauma of going through foster care continue to have in professional, personal settings. And, you know, I know for myself, continue to navigate that as well as working in an organization that I was in their program for 7 years. So
Right.
for the actual hiring and onboarding process of employment, how do you think that that organizations can better manage the difficulties and understanding the supports that may look different when hiring someone with lived expertise?
That's a great question, Jennifer. I think it's important to recognize that folks with lived expertise come from many different backgrounds and many different ability levels in areas that you may not have considered. For instance, I do think that folks that may not have graduated high school due to their trauma and their childhood in the foster care system, those folks still have valuable input into what we should be doing and what practices and policies we should be establishing. And so judging them based off of their levels of literacy or their ability to complete an application is not going to always get you a well-rounded source for your expertise. Really just paying attention to having a broad range of ways to take in those applications, to ask people about their expertise, to, you know, don't have them write an essay every time. For some, that might work well. For others, you're really cutting yourself off on who you're going to be able to consult with. I'd also be wary of what their current situation is. Do they have childcare? Will they be penalized if a kid walks in while they're doing their interview virtually, you know, and also bearing in mind that their attire may not be at its best because they haven't been given the same opportunities that many of you have in their lives. And just keeping all that in mind. Also, again, really bearing in mind the eagerness to please that they have, as well as any shame and disappointment they might feel around themselves and their situation.
Yeah, and speaking to those soft skills and those hard skills, and also just navigating the environment, sometimes the system can feel very boxed in and very structured for reasons that, you know, may have traditionally worked, but are now not necessarily working in the best way. And so when you're trying to build that partnership, really making sure that it's not over professionalized so that it can create that authentic environment. Thank you for sharing about those different areas and also bringing your professional self to the table to really show what it means to be in an organization and hold a professional role while navigating your lived expertise too.
Thank you for having me.
And for our next section, I'd ask Ryan to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Ryan Young, and I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and I recently officially aged out of Arizona's extended foster care program. I'm a social worker, an advocate, activist, and an independent consultant. I was in foster care and extended foster care system for 5 years.
Wow, that's a lot of hats that you wear today, Ryan. And I want to thank you for all that you do for, you know, those in foster care. And I want to ask a question. How did you get started in becoming an independent professional like you're talking about?
I started this work right as I turned 18. I recognized that many young people who come from foster care really don't know what types of resources are out there to support them while relying on their social workers who are already unequipped to support their needs because there is a huge information gap in high turnover rates. It often feels like a lottery when it comes to who you get as a caseworker. I myself had to educate my caseworkers about resources that I would qualify for. Another issue was that of my peers who felt like they didn't have any opportunities to voice their concerns or even that their voices weren't being heard. And that's how everything had started for me. I joined the Youth Empowerment Council with my state, where I currently sit as the president and help guide the council's goals in partnership with young people and adults with lived expertise at the table.
Wow, that's amazing, Ryan. And I can identify with a lot of what you said, even as as a parent in the system. Um, I remember having to advocate for myself a lot and find out information and resources that they weren't even aware of. So I really commend you on that because that's some bravery in there. Because I know that there's always some fear attached to that too, and asking for what you want. And so I'm going to lean into the next question, which is how has your view of partnership changed, over the time of your experience?
My view of partnership has changed in a variety of ways. I've had many opportunities where I was taken advantage of because of what I could bring to the table. And as a result, I was often tokenized and wasn't compensated. More work must be done by systems to value lived experts and partner with them in this work.
Yes, and I couldn't agree more. Also, I can identify with that too. I remember in the beginning of, for me, it was like I wanted to. I showed up to many different places, and I got to tell that really sad story about, what happened to my family and I during our time in child welfare. And but I do remember like not really feeling that valued. And so, for you to speak up about it is a really good thing to do. And it teaches people how to value us, as persons with lived experience. And so, how do you assess commitment to partnerships?
When we all are talking about partnership, we are talking more about, is your engagement authentic? Who is defining authenticity? The lived experts or professionals without any lived experience. When we talk about equity, do you have everyone at the table? Are you compensating lived experts equally? And what will be the impact as a result of partnering with lived experts?
Yeah, that's some good points you made, and really good questions to ask for people to think about when they're engaging with those with lived experience. And so I want to ask one more question. Since we have everyone on here listening to this great session, what are your goals for the future, Ryan?
I have many, many goals. I guess one of them that just is that I want to improve our child welfare system, one that values young people and parents who experience our child welfare system, ensuring that there's equity and that equity is not only a trend. And lastly, I think one of my goals is to one day help run a public child welfare agency and hopefully one in Arizona.
Wow, that's amazing. And I can definitely see you doing that. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you.
And now I would like to turn it over to Colleen Puckett to introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Colleen Puckett, and I am a parent navigator in the state of Georgia. So what that means is I'm a parent with lived experience through the child welfare system. After my children and I reunified, I started to work alongside my attorney as a peer support for other parents that are walking their current journey through the child welfare system all throughout the whole state of Georgia, as well as I co-own Families Anchor with my husband, where we provide parent support groups virtually for all the parents in Georgia, as well for during their case, as well as post reunification. I am also a host for the F Word Foster Care podcast and a parent advisory council member in Georgia. Lots of different things nationally and statewide in the child welfare system, but those are like my main hats that I usually wear.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, Colleen. And can you tell me a little bit about, as a person with lived experience, how you engage with the judicial system?
Absolutely. So, as a parent navigator, I am working with attorneys, like right alongside them. Specifically, the attorney that was actually my attorney in my case. We started to work together about a year after my case. She was just like, let's partner, let's do this. And so we did. And she's a parent attorney, a child attorney, and a guardian ad litem. So, with those, anytime we have a case that comes up in the state of Georgia, I'm able to work with the parents inside court as well as outside of court And so I'm able to provide not only my own lived experience with them, but also be able to interact with the parties that are within those cases, which is really important because it reminds them to have compassion, that who they're working with in these families are real life people. And I'm able to provide those voices and ideas that maybe attorneys or even the system might not think of. But as a parent who's walked my own journey, I'm able to think of those crazy ideas outside the box to help get families back together.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know as a parent myself, I would have definitely appreciated that, in the court setting as well. And let's talk a little bit about, engaging in the community and diffusing the stigmas, for foster care.
That's so huge, right? The stigma is, I feel like it's out of control sometimes, especially, we hear what we hear in media, or we have these assumptions of what the foster care system and any part of the child welfare system looks like, but it's not reality. And so for me, I started a podcast called The F Word Foster Care to just elevate voices all over the system. So we have people who are in the prevention units, we have case managers, attorneys, foster parents to just share what's their experience in the child welfare system so that we can get the community to understand like what it really is like to be in the foster care system, and how can we as a community start to rally around our families instead of judging them, and how can we support them through their journey in the child welfare system.
I remember about 2 years ago listening to one of your F word podcasts, and it really encouraged me to want to bring up the parent voice more in my area. And so I remember our parent advisory council, we tried to include something like that. We didn't dig too deep into it, but it was definitely something that was very inspiring, and still today is very inspiring. And so we've heard a little bit about the judicial system and how you partner with the community and families to change the stigma. And so what about the impact of true partnership have in your work? What can you tell me a little bit about that?
That's huge, right? It's what's the impact that having someone with lived experience within the system. I have to say, like, for me, it has really shown how we can rally around our families. It's giving parents voices that they didn't know that they had. It's advocating for them. It's helping them to just understand what questions to ask and who everybody is. And it gives a sense of security. For me, right now, in real life, I am dealing with the flood of my house. I am struggling. It's been hard. I had no clue what was happening. I felt defeated. And I had a friend that stepped in and was like, girl, I know what this is like. This is what I do for a living. And I'm going to walk along with you and help you to know what's happening. And I have felt so empowered by that. And if that's just a small bit of what parents feel like by having someone with lived experience walk alongside them, it's priceless. I could never, I would want that. I needed that. And so I think it's so important to provide that for families.
Wow, yeah, that is very important. I know my role as a parent partner mentor, how important it is. And just to hear back feedback from the families that I've worked with, they're just saying, like, I know the things you told me, like no one else would have ever told me that. A caseworker wouldn't have told me that. And I know that you genuinely meant everything you said to me because I know you've walked in my shoes before. And so that is very important. And so what would be one lesson for the field that you would like to share today?
So I have 3 C's that I live by. It's contact, connection, and compassion. Keep in contact, reach out to those with lived experience and see what type of voice that they can have in the area that you're working in, giving them space to be able to help other families connect with families, connect with parents, be on the same level. We're all human, so we're all the same. And compassion is so big, right? How would you want to be treated? Treat our families that way, treat our families that have lived experience that way, and to just provide them space and opportunity to give back to the system so that we can make it better.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's like, I call that like a golden rule. That's awesome, Colleen. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us today. And I know you're going through a lot with your family right now. And yeah, thank you for joining us today.
Thank
And
you so much.
I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer.
All right, and so next we have Heather Cantamessa, and Heather's going to introduce her role and a little bit about what she does at her organization. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, my name is Heather Cantamessa, and I'm the Director of Family Impact at Children's Home Society of Washington. And essentially, that is overseeing the Parents for Parents program within our state and also supporting the expansion and partnership with tribes. So my organization has been key supporters of elevating parent voice since early on in the birth parent movement. And we call our birth parents parent allies at the Parents for Parents program. They sponsored a birth parent convening in 2008, and that created our Washington State Parent Advocacy Committee. We work closely to organize and mobilize our voices from everywhere from the state legislative advocacy to child welfare and foster care trainings and in our local courts and communities. So my agency has intentionally acquired funding so that we could start up new Parents for Parents programs, and then was able to hire a parent ally leader that was a dynamic person who led an initiative and lobbied to establish P4P as a state law, where we secured funding for our program. We're always really mindful to honor the Parents for Parents program model, ensuring that it is truly parent-led. I'm a parent ally in my position, and I supervise the statewide and national program managers who are also parents with lived experience. And then they support host organizations who hire parent ally program coordinators, and those program coordinators then supervise parents with lived experience on their team. And we're actually, the parents we meet with that are currently involved in the system, we think of them as parent allies in training because their case is going to get closed, they're going to be successful, and then we're going to recruit them on board to be part of our program. And of course, we couldn't do any of this without the collaboration of stakeholders. We really do truly have valued partnerships with the stakeholders in child welfare, and we really couldn't do any of this without being allowed a lot of autonomy and support.
Yeah, it seems like there's parent voice at every level and also levels where decision making happens. So really moving from that space of feedback into true partnership, which is what builds that community that you're speaking of. That sounds like it is really connected. So next, can you talk a little bit about the process of compensation and how you advocate for that for the parents in your network?
So compensating parents is one of the many ways that we demonstrate that we value their expertise and their time. We have a variety of methods to compensate parent allies. We can hire, contract, or stipend them. We allow each host organization that we support and provide technical assistance to decide what the going rate is and what a livable wage is. And funding does influence that somewhat. And we have a suggested allocation in our budget that dedicates 70% of funding to the parent ally line item. And I feel like in this work, allowing stipends or contracts with parent allies really affords flexibility for the parents.
And when speaking about compensation, it sounds like you all as an organization don't only want to say, hey, this is what we'd like to offer to you to be here, but truly making the space for it to become creative and what parents really need to happen and want to happen, and able to make that space in their life. So can you tell me a little bit about how you are a person with lived expertise and those within your organization can pinpoint what they would like to have as priorities in the work, not only around compensation or engagement, but truly in the communities that they're coming from?
Absolutely. We are always training our replacements, and we've learned that by our own experience. I started off as a I started off volunteering to facilitate the class in my local community, and then we got funding and I applied to be the program coordinator, the P4P coordinator. And so after coordinating a program, I then went on to contract with Children's Home Society of Washington to implement new programs across the state, which eventually led to me being hired here. So as you can see, that's just a really common story of how we advance and we have independence in how, the level of interaction that we have with the program, or the level of involvement that we have as parent allies. And a lot of parents come in to Parents for Parents in different levels of their professional journey. Some have entry-level skills, and this is their first time of employment. And so each site works to assess their strengths with them and meet them where they're at with training. Some parents have worked really hard to set up social safety nets, and they use that to support their families financially. So our program, we don't want to push parents past where they're comfortable with climbing the economic ladder. And so we really work to build skills and allow parents that autonomy in their different levels of involvement.
So what you've shared today, we've talked about training, we've talked about infrastructure, we've talked about true engagement and being parent-led. What is a lesson for the field that you have that you feel like your organization really shines in the community?
So really, every community has our own unique culture and dynamic, and we humbly partner with new sites, knowing that they're the experts on their community, and they help us identify and support and train the local PAs to lead their program. So the solution is really in your own backyard. It is the families in your community, and we all need outside help sometimes to really be functioning at our best and engaging parents the most impactfully.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing today, and thank you for all of the lessons that you have learned and been able to give back to the community. And we appreciate you so much in really teaching what true partnership means and showing that through your organization.
What a great session. And yes, I'd like to touch on again the importance of giving folks a livable wage. I myself left the role working directly with families because I no longer could afford to be there. And that is an unfortunate situation because I hold the capacity to do that very emotional but rewarding work. So I think including bonuses or being compensated for extra expenses like gas and wear and tear on our vehicles is very important to think about. Also, I'd like to add that the culture within the agencies with those that partner with lived experience does not always express the courtesy of being mindful that another birth parent professional is in the room. So I believe using the tools that we mentioned today could help transform that environment. Not only that, we all know that collaboration moves at the speed of trust. We should trust those we invite to take on these very important roles to work directly with families, because we know that a person that has been through it knows how to help others experiencing it.
As you've heard today, there's an emotional piece that will always be part of the perspectives of those who are now experts in the field that have the insight of having lived in it. There is a responsibility to be practical about what we're asking from youth and families to show up well prepared and be well supported to provide the productive partnership. And additionally, what that means for the system and shifting the perspectives to do so. During our preparation for this and presentations today, our presenters have shared insights that cannot be gained from formal education and knowledge about the necessity of support, training, and equitable integrative practices in the individual, community, judicial, and systems levels of the child welfare community. As a professional who has chosen a career in this ever-changing system, regardless of if you have lived expertise or not, there's a commitment to improve the system, and that keynote insight comes from moving beyond the needle of just a seat at the table, but truly developing that bi-directional understanding of each other and of the work without assumption, but truly making space for the mutual conversation. Assessing and checking for feedback loops that are sustainable and sensitive to what it means to move from a client of the system to a human working side to side, to shift to a place of validation and action planning. Gaining insight around what it means to view youth and parent voice as our own independent perspectives navigating the system and the improvement of the system, but also creating environments where these unique perspectives are brought together to improve those partnerships that have traditionally been severed by policy and practice. This requires taking the time to make space for opportunities and pushing past the box of current policy and practice to really develop a commitment to addressing the action steps, to embracing diversity, inclusion, and equity for all youth and families. When the goal of the system is improvement by connection, the understanding that the voices of the youth and families from all backgrounds, validation of the diversity of the initial contact with the system, and the growth mindset of communication matched with intentional support can lead to transformation across the board. Thank you so much to our presenters, Ashley, Ryan, Colleen, and Heather. You have made a road where there was not a path, and I know many youth and families are beyond inspired by you. Additionally, thank you for sharing your tools and resources for our attendees to take back and adapt into their communities. Thank you, Elizabeth and Tracy and the technical team for your support and dedication to lived expertise by building this entire expo with our community and being adaptable to the functioning of lived expertise. And thank you to my teammate Pascal, also Becky and Betsy for bringing the session to fruition. We hope you can spend time engaging and learning more throughout the day in these various sessions, and thank you for your commitment to the partnership with lived expertise.